Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I hope you're having a wonderful time, relaxing and drinking lots of delicious champagne and keeping yourself lovely and cozy and warm, because I've got a lovely story for you tonight. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story.
Dear Sarah, my name is Hilda, and I live in the heart of the Tennessee countryside, in a beautiful mountain home, on the edge of a rural dirt road that is both remote and well off the beaten track. My gorgeous Swiss-style wooden cabin is surrounded by beautiful rolling green valleys and ubiquitous trees that literally stretch out into vast areas of ongoing forest that seem to just spread out for eternity. I also have a couple of glorious ponds on my land that have been here for over 100 years and are a wonderful place for the deer to congregate, where they enjoy a cool drink on a hot summer's day. I am not married, but I live here alone with my 2 yellow Labradors called Tumbles and Twix, and they are the most faithful companions that you could ever ask for, especially when you live on your own. I do have 2 grown-up children now, who live in Germany and have long since flown the nest, but we always keep in touch by using Skype on a regular basis, which I find wonderful. My children spent their childhood growing up here in the Tennessee mountain air, and they have the most wonderful recollections of their childhood here. One thing my children are unanimous about is their belief that something strange was going on in our woods for years. When my children were young, they always said that they saw sightings of strange orbs and heard disembodied voices that they would hear when they were playing in our yard. My youngest child claimed to have seen the hooded figures of monks chanting in the woods from time to time. At that time, I dismissed her claims as fanciful thinking, but now, all these years later, I wasn't so sure. Well, not anymore. It is inevitable that over the years, living in this part of the world, you get to hear the usual animal calls during the night, like crickets, frogs, coyotes and owls, and the occasional wolf. But there have also been times when I've heard other strange sounds that I just could not identify, like whooping sounds, wood knocking, and very strange screams that were so alarming it would leave my hair standing on end. One day, long after my children had flown the nest, I noticed other unexplainable sounds that came directly from the woods, and it sounded exactly like monks chanting, and it was so hard to explain. All I knew was that I would wake up in the middle of the night to hear this mysterious chanting, and it sounded eerily supernatural. I remember my younger child telling me of her visual sightings of these monks. Now the skeptic in me was beginning to wonder if there was more to her story than I had ever envisaged. I had always avoided walking in the woods for some unexplained reason. Perhaps on an unconscious level, I was intimidated by those forests, because it would seem that something oddly menacing, almost evil, was always watching me from those woods. It was on a bright summer's morning, when the sunlight filtered across the valley in streams of beautiful golden light, that I heard that mystical, esoteric monk music coming from the woods all over again. It was such a crystal clear kind of noise that you could be forgiven for believing that someone had actually set up a sound system in the clearing, and I found the music was drawing me into the woods with a seductive intrigue. So, armed with my rifle in my hands, I took Tumble and Twix in the woods for a walk. I did feel safe with them by my side. As I entered the wooded clearing, the deep chanting sounds became louder and louder and clearer and clearer. There was a gentle breeze blowing, and I saw this cloudy, smoky haze drifting past me, just like smoke, and it smelt exactly like frankincense and myrrh, and was surprisingly very uplifting. Suddenly I saw 2 hooded, cloaked figures wearing brown robes with rope sashes tied around their middles and leather-thong sandals on their feet. These men looked exactly like monks, and I could not see their faces clearly, but I noticed the hands were clasped in prayer, and it seemed that they were in a deep meditative state. Yet all this time the mysterious chanting continued to fill the forest with a mystical, supernatural ambience, which was not of this world. But I will tell you this, it was enchantingly beautiful. As I drew closer to the monks, I watched them literally glide through the wall of a dense thicket and then vanish before my sight, just like a pair of ghosts. I was intrigued by what I'd seen, and the experience left me feeling serenely mellow. At the same time, I wondered if I'd really seen those monks, or whether my imagination was in some kind of magical overdrive. But smelling the lingering wafts of woody incense convinced me that what I had seen was indeed real. Both Tumbles and Twix were not afraid of these strange ghostly figures, but were actually wagging their tails furiously, like they would do in the presence of a lovely friend, and it was their ease and joyful countenance that encouraged me to proceed further into the woods with a fearless eagerness. I noticed that so many tree branches in the woods were twisted into strange angles, and it really did look as if it had been intentionally done, but I knew it would take a great deal of skill and a huge amount of strength to be able to manipulate and twist branches in such a way, especially without managing to break them. Then there were other branches that appeared to be purposely snapped. I also noticed trees that were turned upside down to expose the roots, and they looked so sinister and menacing, almost like a large blazing red sign saying, "Get out!" It was almost as if something or someone was marking their territory in a strange kind of mystical Morse code. Finally, I came across these strange teepee-looking structures, but they looked like statuesque markers of some kind, which had symbolic meaning behind them. So it really felt like the forest was ablaze with these odd symbols, which was a signing system I did not understand or comprehend. But I did get a very clear message from them, and it was, "Get out!" I did get also the sense of being an intruder in these woods and interrupting something that was not for my eyes to see. But I was curious, and it was with this eager enthusiasm to explore further that urged me to walk deeper into the heart of the forest. I finally came to an open clearing, and I noticed on the left there was a very large nest there, and that was strewn with layers upon layers of twigs, branches and hay, and it looked like something big was using the space as a sleeping area. But what kind of creature was resting there, I wondered? Whatever it was, it had to be huge, because the nest was massive. Strewn in the right-hand corner of the nest was a pile of animal carcasses of what the creature had been eating, and there were carcasses of hog, deer, squirrel, coon, and rabbit, piled up in a huge heap without discrimination. So whatever this predator was, he or she was eating well and eating almost anything and everything in sight. It was clearly still living here because there was a half-eaten squirrel on the pile, still waiting to be devoured. My dog was not happy when he smelt the nest. Neither of them were. It was like they sensed that whatever this predator was, it was something that clearly terrified them. They were whimpering uneasily, and their tails were tucked in between their legs in submissive resignation. It was weird because everything in the forest suddenly became eerily quiet, and the only way I can describe it was as if someone turned all the background noises off, because there was no bird song anymore, and it became deathly still. I want to tell you that an experience like this is utterly unnerving, and I was determined to get out of this creepy, sinister forest as quickly and as fast as I could. I was about to turn around and go back to my cabin when I sensed these steely evil eyes watching me, and it was the most terrifying feeling that I have ever experienced in my entire life. I really got the sense that a powerful predator was stalking me, and that I might be next on his dinner menu. It was amazing how I just sensed him there, even though I could not physically see him. Believe me, sometimes not seeing the threat face to face can be worse than actually seeing it, because you don't know what the impending threat actually is. You have no idea where it's coming from, or when it may just suddenly pounce out on you in surprise. Suddenly those terrible fears of mine were confirmed when I heard this low guttural growl that sounded more intimidating than the roar of a lion, and I found myself freezing up like a block of ice. Ah! I noticed that both my dogs were feeling it too, as they lay at my feet, seemingly paralysed by an overwhelming fear. Ah! Ah! I could see some shrubbery moving towards my left, and the branches of a small tree swaying to and fro and backwards and forwards. I really felt that this thing, whatever it was, clearly wanted to scare me half to death. And it was working, because I was filled with an overwhelming sense of impending dread. Suddenly I got the whiff of the most deplorable odour you could ever imagine smelling. It smelt like a decaying corpse, and once I had smelt a dead body in my life, and if anything could be worse than that smell, this was it. It was utterly foul and very sweet and sickly. Then I heard this thunderous sound that sounded exactly like a crash of thunder, and then bolting through a barrage of thorny, dense thicket like a huge bulldozer was the deadliest predator that I have ever seen in my entire life. A creature like the likes of such I have never seen before, and I hope to never see again as long as I live. This creature was a humanoid bipedal ape of about 10 feet tall and easily 1,100 pounds, and he was covered in thick, dense, short black hair with a large white ribbon-like stripe down his back. He had the most gargantuan shoulders with a huge, massive torso that made the rest of his body seem almost willowy by contrast. But I promise you, there was nothing small about this thing. He had long arms so typical of primates and slightly shorter legs that appeared strong and muscular. The head was elongated like a cone, and the grey-skinned face was graced with long white wispy beard. But this creature was otherwise hairless on the face, with a very big flat nose, deep-set eyes, a large thin mouth, and a very prominent brow ridge. Furious brown eyes regarded me with murderous rage, and he was seething, and the message was clear. He wanted me dead. I definitely sensed he was only interested in one thing, and that was adding me to the large pile of skeletal remains on his nesting area, along with his half-eaten squirrel. I stood there paralysed with fear, and so immobilised I simply could not manoeuvre my clumsy fingers to pull back the trigger. Believe me, I tried, because my life hung in the balance, but this creature had a powerful emotional and mental hold over me that was so incapacitating that I simply could not use my rifle. This hairy humanoid ape lunged towards me and grabbed my rifle, tossing it in the air in absolute disgust, and then he threw it across the forest floor, and I heard it crashing on the ground with a loud almighty thud. Now I was well and truly at the mercy of this thing, whatever on earth it was. It rarely looked like a creature you would expect to see only in your darkest nightmares. It was between me and him now, and I stood no chance against this hairy giant. My life flashed before my eyes, and I found myself wondering how long it would take for him to kill me. I was praying that my dying process would not hurt, because I knew that my life was finally over. There was no doubt about that in my mind, and it was so surprising because in those seconds I began to accept my horrifying fate, because it was a realm that was out of my control. Suddenly my dog Twix, who had always been protective of me, overcame his incredible fear for some unexplainable reason, and jumped up and nipped this creature very hard several times. And believe me, that was a bold thing to do to a predator like this. Suddenly the creature let out an immobilizing, furious roar, because my dog had dared to challenge him. I do not believe that anything had ever taken this creature on before, not even one of his own kind. He was a monstrous bully that always got his own way because of the terror that he would orchestrate among his victims. That I was certain of. My dog's bites clearly infuriated him. In an outburst of extreme rage, he grabbed Twix and was about to throttle him to death, and with a single blow of his mighty hands. But I could not stand back and watch this creature tear my precious dog apart. In that moment I screamed at the top of my lungs, "No! No! No! Please, no! You can't do that!" And then I courageously lunged towards the creature and poked my fingers and sharp long nails directly into both of its eyes, semi-blinding him in the process with a powerful force that even surprised me. I suppose that I knew I had nothing to lose. I might as well die fighting back as hard as I could. I believe my dogs had come to a very similar conclusion because their fear had been taken over with an instinctive desire to fight back and to protect me as hard as they could. It seemed like their fear had magically dissipated. The creature let out a huge, pathetic whimpering sound, which seemed utterly ridiculous, coming from such an intimidating predator. He was clearly in pain, and he cradled his painful eyes in his massive cupped hands. In that second, my dogs and I wasted no time and ran away as fast as we could out of that forest. Suddenly I heard the sound of that chanting music, and I could smell that strange incense all over again. And in that moment, an overwhelming sense of peace and calm came over my entire body, and I noticed that even my dog's nature had transformed, and they were wagging their tails as if nothing had happened. I looked back into the forest, and that was when I saw two cloaked figures of the monks walking away and disappearing into the undergrowth. I knew something outer-worldly had happened in that forest, and as crazy as it may sound, I believe I was helped by those ghostly monks. They had been like guardian angels to me. I was certain of that. I just remember the incapacitating fear that paralyzed me so much, but suddenly it was like the trance-like hold that this hairy humanoid had over me was shattered like glass and replaced by an extreme desire to fight back, which not only miraculously affected me, but Twix and also the other dog, with a boldness that neither of us naturally possessed. I have no idea why I chose to aim for this creature's eyes, and even now I marvel at how I did this, because I literally disabled the creature for long enough to escape from those woods with both my life and the lives of my two devoted dogs still intact. After this incident, I did some research on my property, and I found that in the 1800s, the ground that I was living on was used as a retreat for monks, and during one of those retreats, two of the monks were killed on the land by a rogue mountain lion. It made me feel even more certain that these monks helped me because they had died in the hands of a predatory creature themselves, and so they rescued me from a very similar fate. I told my children in Germany what had happened, and my young girl told me that she had seen those two monks in the forest on several occasions before. She had also smelt the incense and heard the mystical, intriguing chanting. She said that she had always felt that those monks were loving, spiritual, godly men. She reminded me of the dreadfully sad time when Panda, our black and white tabby, had gone missing for 2 whole weeks. "I prayed so hard for Panda to return home safely, Mum," she said. And then I remembered those ghost-like monks in the woods, and I knew they were godly men. And so I asked them to help me to find Panda. I didn't think that anything would actually happen, but 5 minutes later, Panda appeared in the kitchen, meowing for something to eat. It was then, Mum, she told me, I knew that those monks had helped me, and I believe they helped you too, by enabling you to escape from that dangerous creature, by giving you supernatural courage and strength, as well as the 2 dogs of ours. For a long time I could not put a name to that strange creature that I'd seen in the forest that day. But now I believe he fits the profile of being a Bigfoot, a Sasquatch, or a hairy man. I still sometimes hear that strange esoteric music on our land. I do not think the monks are trapped here at all, but I think they come and visit us from time to time, the place that was once a retreat to them, and also because it was the place where they encountered that deadly mountain lion. I believe they do revisit me from time to time, and I can hear them with their music filtering across the valley. All I can say is that that is the most phenomenal story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.